Okay, welcome to my YouTube channel. This will be a first run, so forgive me, but nonetheless, this will be introductory stuff for Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. Hi, Wolf190D here. And in my current campaign setup, I have started as Germany, 1890, so at the very beginning. And some things I like to do to start off anyway is, well, actually, let me go through my setup real quick. What I've done here is I've started on the legendary difficulty, 1890, as I've already said. Designed my own fleet, and I've put the AI to random personalities. All right, so let me go into my ship design, and nothing fancy to start off, but this is what's worked in my campaign that I've done earlier. So I'll start off with battleships. I like to pump them up to 18 knots. Gives them decent speed. Don't expect anything fancy on, and standard bulkheads, of course. Don't expect anything fancy on equipment. It's all, if you start off at 1890, you're going to be pretty basic on your tech level. So standard bulkheads, I don't mess with the beam or the draft. Again, I've experimented with these ships before in a previous campaign. So for a main tower, let me see here. What did I go with on this again? I think I did the best tower available. Set it all the way back. Secondary towers, go with the rear. Or did I go with a medium? No, I went with a rear tower. A good rear tower. All right. Main guns, once again, nothing fancy here, but go with 9-inch guns. They're pretty much going to be more than capable of dealing with most enemy ships that you encounter early game. Try to balance those out. And for funnels, and again, being that the tech level is pretty much non-existent, you're not going to get much in the way of engine efficiency on your early battleships. It's okay. The idea is to get some ships, get them ready, and have a good fight. All right. So for casement guns, I'm going to go ahead and load them out with 4-inch barrels. It's a good middle of the road casement gun early on. Actually, yeah. It's decent. It's got a good rate of fire, and it has decent enough accuracy, plus it saves on weight. Now on the 2-inch guns, I like to load out 2-inch guns all around there. So you get a pretty good build. And again, tech level, the compound armor might be difficult to start off, so in order to save on cost, I like to leave these guys on iron plate. And let me see here. Leave the secondary shells on max HE, but put your main gun shells on standard ratio. You're only going to have base fuse and standard to start off. Black powder, brown powder. It's again, it's pretty basic. All right, barbette if you've got it. Sometimes when the game loads, you get varying levels of tech. And that reminds me, actually, if I can, yes, I can. So put a couple of those 2-inch, and the 2-inch guns really, they're not really for engaging with larger ships. The 4-inch guns can handle maybe some light cruisers if they get close, but the 2-inch guns are really just a deterrent for destroyers. So max out their length. It just gives them a little bump to accuracy. And see, it goes to 13, 14. The 4-inch guns you really can't toy with. And again, this is just a this is a basic early game build. This is going to give you ships to put in the water right off the start, unless of course you're going with a pre-designed fleet. Honestly, I have no idea what that does, but nonetheless. All right, so hydraulic turrets, yeah, that's all you're going to get. Now, you can do one of two things from the start. You can do standard reload, which gives you 0.78 rounds per minute on your nines, 3 twin nines, or you can go with enhanced reloading. All right, and that's going to bump you to 0.86. So it's not much of an improvement, but and again, the reason I like to start off with 9-inch guns on these ships is because they get decent enough accuracy, but it's really the rate of fire. It's really the rate of fire early on, right? So, I think I have all of my armaments done. I have my funnels. Try to get two of the small funnels rather, because the large I mean, it's really a numbers game early. You're going to get more smoke interference, but the funnel capacity is going to be better. You get 12 because two of the small funnels versus one huge funnel will fit in here, and you only get 7.5 off of that. To start off, and again, early level techs, what are you going to come up against? You can start off with standard shell size. That's what I'll leave it on. And let me see here. All the other tech is pretty much going to be, again, non-existent. So we start off with 18 knots. You can lower the speed if you choose. That'll bump your engine efficiency. Here, I'll give you an example. See, at 17 knots, you run up to 66.7. But because I want the higher top speed. All right. And let me see here. What did I want to move on to? Oh, yes, armoring. I do believe. Now, feel free to leave some comments. I know I can't remember everything at once. And again, this is kind of my first run through this. So, what I did for armor on these is 15 on the main. And I go 75. 7.5 on the forebelt. And the deck armor is not as important at this era. Most of your gun trajectories are going to be very flat. So you could even bump your belts up to 8 if you want. But I'm going to go ahead and get through. This first. Now you'll notice that there's a really horrible forward weight offset. There's not much you can do. As far as I think I've heard some people refer to it as noodling. There's not much you can do to noodle these. So what you can do is actually give an armor offset. And I found that this works in early era game. Really, it's probably about the most effective way to rebalance ships, because you're not dealing with modern hulls. You can't move stuff forward and back as easily because, well, the superstructure areas are pretty well fixed. They're pretty well fixed. So let me see here. Can I armor him up some more? Yes, we'll go with a 16 on the main. Now keep in mind, at the start you're going to have iron plate or compound. Now I'll show you here momentarily, but this is generally a really good introductory way of building these ships. And then of course you can go down later and refit, which if you're playing the campaign and you're trying to go the long run, which is why I generally lately have been starting in 1890. You can up armor these guys. Let me see here. Let's see what 9 does. Yeah, it's a ridiculous offset. It really is. Now the only other thing you could do, and if you're new to the game, you hold control to do this. But be aware. Notice on the right over there in the sections thing where your citadel becomes much larger the further you space things out. So it is something to take into consideration. These ships aren't going to be the best balanced ships in the world. And again, it's simply because of their design, but they work. They do work. And I'll try to upload some videos later with some combat performance on these guys. But nonetheless, you don't need much in the way of deck armor early on. Most of your engagements are taking place because the view range of the ships is not it's not fantastic. You know, you don't have to worry about ships with radar and long-range plunging fire and stuff. So really the main concern early is going to be your belt armor. And then the superstructure, I do like to put a little bit of armor on the superstructure simply because it better protects your ship's equipment, you know, your funnels, your towers. The conning tower, though, on the other hand, is something else entirely, and I generally like to max those out early on because if your conning tower gets destroyed, you suffer all kinds of penalties to your ship. All right, so as a general rundown for initial battleships, put your speed, you know, where you want it. You can do different things. I mean, you see, if you bump him up to 19, it's going to drop him down to 50% engine efficiency. 18 is actually a lot faster than most ships you encounter early game. From what I've seen in, again, the campaign that I'm actually running, the AI's early level battleships typically are anywhere between 15 and 16 knots. It's about what my general run-in has been with those. Don't mess with the beam, don't mess with the draft. You want him pretty well maxed out on tonnage. The range, you can increase the range if you have the weight, depending on, you know, any modifications that you might do to your ship. And standard bulkheads. The reason for that is battleships tend to have better armor, and I'll probably do just a basic run through of my whole early setup. But anyway, it's basic. You don't need anything fancy to start off. If you want to start with the option of designing your own fleet. All right. So let me do a quick double check. Do I want heavier shells? 13.7 on the penetration. Yeah, the penetration's not great, but that's where your HE shells come in. And you know, honestly, as the game progresses and technology progresses, some things I will do actually is I'll have ships with really good AP shells, but sometimes, and usually it's with my battleships, I like the most damage causing HE shells that you get. The high capacity HE shells are actually very nice. They set lots of fires. They destroy lots of stuff on top of ships sometimes. And that's two different things also to consider. Do you want to punch holes in ships and flood them to sink them? Or do you simply want to burn them out or kill off the crew? There's three major ways to eliminate enemy vessels. So you sink them by flooding, they burn up, or they surrender due to heavy crew losses. All things to consider. So for me, on my battleships, I like to stick with the base fuse. The next one that you might unlock would be nose fuse, just nose fuse, which gives you increased HE capacity. So it reduces the muzzle velocity, so it's going to reduce your range a little bit. But what it does is it has higher chance to fire and causes more HE damage. Some people would also like to add torpedo launchers to battleships, but I mean, for me, battleships really, I don't much care to put torpedo tubes on. So I think that's the basic rundown for early tech battleships. You'll notice that I have about 1,000 more tons that I can put on this. So, oh, yeah. Let me go ahead and do that. I'll show you what the difference is going to be. So you'll notice that under armor quality, with iron plate, you get negative 22%. All right. And, you know, pay close attention to what it's also going to do to other parameters of the ship. particularly cost and weight. All right, so if I switch over to compound armor, and you can do this at the start, it's about $2 million more for the compound armor, but the weight limit is the real concern here, because this guy maxes out at 11,750 tons. Now, what you would have to do in this situation is say, okay, I'm going to take a look at my guns, and you'll notice also the armor quality went from negative 22 to positive 38. So the compound armor is actually better quality. So what you can do is you can reduce your armors. You can go 10 on the main belt, you can go 5 on the forward, and we can drop the, let me see here, we'll say 6 inches on an aft belt, and we're still overweight. Okay, so we might do, to save the forward weight offset, is drop the main deck armor down. And remember, we have a citadel, so the citadels are nice. You don't have to put armor on them, but what they do, increase hull weight, increase armor cost on the belt, and then also increase the armor cost on the deck. But the biggest thing is better armor strength, right? So you're getting plus 33. If you drop the citadel, armor quality goes down to plus 35 with what we're doing right now. So if you put the citadel on it, you also get other bonuses to resistance, reduced engine damage chance, reduced ammo detonation chance. So the citadels, especially on your battleships, are almost essential to do. So this is something else you could do, and notice we're back down actually slightly cheaper than the iron plate, and we're also pushing close to our max displacement. Now remember, in the campaign you're probably going to do refits, maybe a couple, maybe several more. You'll get access to better armor types, you get access to better barbettes. You can put double hulls on these guys, but by the time you're really having to worry about that, it's almost a non-issue for this particular ship. So you have that. Bulkheads, you can reinforce the bulkheads, and that's one reason for reducing the bulkheads from maximum. Put the crew quarters up on standard though. You don't want a skeleton crew. What you'll find more often than not, and you can even give this a spacious. I'm not going to do that on this because I want I need to save crew. Again, this is right at the start, 1890, and what the increased crew is going to do is improve ship performance, particularly repairs. So you take hits and your ship floods, more crew is going to allow you to more rapidly deal with various things that go on with your ships throughout battles. So this is my battleship. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then the next one up, and again, this is just one way that I go about doing this. I don't personally mess with coastal defense ships. They're pretty well trash. They don't do much. Torpedo cruisers, I have built these before, but again, in the interest of early game economics, I don't typically fool with that. So what I like to do with cruisers on the start is reduce 3 and 5 on the beam draft respectively. Stay with the standard bulkheads. Go back to standard crew quarters, and what I'll do is I'll put him on a 20 knot speed. And if I have the room after, I think what I'll do on that, what's the max displacement on this, is 4,000 tons. Okay. All right, so basic hull setup. And again, early game, you don't even need to concern yourself with any of this because, I mean, you could play with the rudder. I generally don't. I have experimented with it before in the past. You can make your ships turn tighter, but the rudder shifts slower. And then, of course, you can make them shift faster, but they don't turn as tight. So depending on the ship you're putting together, you can do various things with that. So Oops, I just went and reset everything. Sorry about that. Like I said, I'm new to this, so work with me here, work with me here. But this is a good introductory. I would think this would be a good introductory thing, especially for people who are new to the game, or even veterans who are looking for a different perspective. A different perspective is always good. I know I've been watching, let me see here, Brother Monroe a bit on YouTube as well, so he's also a very good source of information. All right, so basic hull setup. All right, for the cruiser, I go directly to compound armor because they're not going to be, they need the extra protection for one. I also put a citadel on my early heavy cruisers. Now, what I'm going to do for this guy, did I go with standard 1 or front tower 2 or front tower 1? I think I went with a 2. I like the I like the 2s. Especially early. Well, you know, and pay attention to the difference between towers and any other equipment that you put on there. And again, as I sort of pointed out with the Battleship, 2 of the small funnels works better as far as getting your engine efficiency up than 1 of the big ones. Now, you could put 1 of the big ones on there and reduce smoke interference, but again, early game, you want to get your engine efficiency done out as well as you can. All right, so go with a couple of standard funnels. I went with the 2 big towers on this one. If I recall, that's what I did, and it works really well on the cruisers. I go with 7-inch guns on the early cruisers, and they deal really well. These guys will handle themselves very well. I mean, in my current campaign, I think I'm up into 1902, 1903, somewhere in there, and I'm still mounting 7-inch guns on my heavy cruisers, and they're still able to very effectively deal with enemy cruisers. Now, on the cruisers, I like to do torpedo tubes because they're a little bit more maneuverable, but also it helps to have that extra punch on, say, larger ships. Not to mention, it's also a pretty good light cruiser or destroyer deterrent. If you don't hit them, it still forces them to maneuver away. And I'll reduce the ammo on the torpedoes on my heavy cruisers because their main function for me isn't. It's not to be a torpedo boat, and you'll also notice that if you increase the ammo to standard, you get increased detonation chance. So for me, it's just a kind of a smart move because battleships are going to punch holes in these guys, and there's a good chance that a battleship will explode the torpedo ammunition in your cruiser and kind of ruin your day. So with the cruisers, and as always with my main fighting ships, I'll run standard ratio on the main shells because their function is to engage enemy surface vessels, right? And let me see here. I'll do enhanced reloading on this guy as well. I usually like to do that on my cruisers anyway, so you'll note it almost gets you to 1.2 rounds per minute. The reload time is just under 51 seconds. You can go with heavy shells on this. For my early cruisers, I generally don't. The standard shells seem to do just fine. And then let's get into, before I do that, let me go ahead and work my casement guns. Now, what I do with my first cruisers, because the biggest purpose I like to use my heavy cruisers for is screening my battleships and keeping those pesky little destroyers off of them. So, this is my initial cruiser setup. I'll put pretty much nothing but 2s on here. They fire very fast. They're more accurate. They're more accurate than the 3s at the start. What you can do with casement guns, and this is something that I have toyed with, what you can do with your casement guns is take this top level of casement guns and stick some 4s in there. Actually, no. Oh, wait. Yes, yes. You can stick a group of 4s on there, but what you have to pay attention to on these guys, oops, I forgot to readjust my cruiser weight. Okay. Okay. Readjust my displacement rather. Now what the 4s are going to do is, again, it's going to give you ability to deal with light cruisers. You'll notice that the 2-inch casement really only go out to 2,500 meters, and their maximum penetration is 1.3. So what they're going to really be for are destroyers, and that's why I like the 2s. Now, after I put my 2s on, change the length, max it out, and I think at the beginning, I'm not sure with the other nations, I've really only played with Germany so far, but pretty early on, really, you're limited on tech. So you want to try to keep your costs down because you're going to build a few of these to start. I don't by any means drain my funds completely. Part of the reason for that is I like to build my economy early. So I don't do too much in the way of fancy stuff. I just work with effective. Now you'll notice the cruiser efficiency is really terrible. The efficiency on the cruisers is terrible. The max optimal speed on this hull is 20.5 knots. I've got him just under that at 20. I've got my battleships, I think, a little over. Nope, my battleships are just under as well. So trying to keep my engine efficiency, and your big ships early on, they're just not going to be there. Their engine efficiency is going to be terrible. This guy also has really bad, the early German hulls, particularly the cruiser hulls, I just don't like them. Even the armored cruiser 2 on the German tech line, it's terrible for balancing. The cruisers are easier to do than the battleships, of course, but you'll see with I'll show you next with the light cruisers actually are a little bit more workable. So where was I? Armoring, yes. So a good rule of thumb for armoring is to work within the confines of what your guns are. So 9 inches of penetration, and actually it's a relatively simple mathematical equation. I don't know if anybody else online explains this, but if you're looking at your penetration values, okay, say somebody else has the same armor set up that I have with the same gun. All right, you're looking at let me see here, 5,000 meters. You're punching through 5.9 inches of armor. That doesn't translate directly into 5.9 inches of armor. You have to take into account armor quality, right? So if you want to set up your armor to protect at 5,000 meters or even 2,500 meters, I would recommend going with the closer range, 7.8. You would take 7.8 and multiply it by 1.38. That'll give you 38% over the current value. All right, and what that works out to on this, and this is one thing that you can do, you don't by any means have to. Some folks will say, well, just go to your gun caliber, right? But anyway, 7.8 times 1.38, that's going to translate to, let me see here. Oh no, did I do that the wrong way? I did do that the wrong way. 7 inches of armor, it's not 7.8, it's 7 inches of armor times 1.38 will actually, with this current armor setup on a 7-inch gun at 2,500 meters, will actually has an effective armor value of 9.66, right? So you're talking about requiring a much higher velocity or even a larger shell, basically better penetration value. So if you take 7.8, let me see here. There is another way to do that, and I'm kind of brain farting right now, but nonetheless, 9.66 inches of protection at 2,500 meters against this same type of, or rather, actually, that's just the raw overall protection. Of course, you can take other things into account, armor angling, which causes ricochets. So you could, but I'm gonna do what I've been doing with this guy so far. Up, it's actually not going to work. So let's drop him to 6. 3. Why do I feel like I messed something up somewhere? Oh, that's what it is. I was demoing another potential build. You'd have to lighten your armor to do so. So, like I said, with my first cruisers, I really like to just all 2-inch on the secondary guns. And if you max those out, you get your accuracy much higher. So your casement guns early are actually going to be preferable, simply because they're just going to be more accurate. I think they're 2.6 tons, 8. They're a little heavier, but they just work better. And this is actually a good place to, especially as you progress through the game. Up in the upper right here, the overview, you can check your gun armaments, the bore size of your guns, and then of course the length of the barrels. All right, so back to armoring. We got 3 inches. We got 3 inches on the aft belt. The main deck, once again, on cruisers, you know, or rather not on cruisers, on the early game, is not going to be as imperative. All right. Now you'll notice I'm offsetting my armor just a little bit. I left this one alone on the aft deck to sort of help out with the balance. The conning tower, can we go to 6 inches on the conning tower? We sure can. And then on the superstructure, I think on the cruisers I like about 1 inch. All right. And then on the Citadel, you don't have to add anything to it, but typically I like to armor up the internal citadels just to add a little bit of extra protection. And it's not like I don't have the tonnage to give right now. So, excuse me. I think, oh yes, barbettes. We want a barbette. We want the Citadel. Single bottom hull is all we have, and standard bulkheads is all we have. All right. So what you can do early game for your cruisers particularly, and I'm building general ships here. I'm not specific building anything. I'm just trying to build general purpose ships that can pretty much work well in any kind of situation. You'll notice the engine efficiency is god awful on this thing, and it doesn't get any better. You can't add any. That's why I really dislike the early German cruisers. I don't build many of them. These are just, like I said, pretty much a really heavy platform. I mean, early destroyers really aren't going to hurt this thing unless they hit you with a torpedo, but that's where the cruiser's maneuverability comes in. So really, for me, it's a platform for mostly putting a lot of 2-inch guns and just basically crushing destroyers. Max HE on the secondary shells. Why? Your penetration values are going to be what they're going to be on your secondary battery. You can play with this too, and I've seen some other people do that. But personally, for me, secondary batteries, you're going to be slinging a lot of HE. And that actually kind of reminds me that it's another reason why I like the more destructive HE shells, the ones that do more damage and cause more fire. Because the secondary batteries actually benefit from that. And plus, if you raid convoys with this thing, you don't have to worry about armor anyway. If you raid convoys with anything, really, you don't have to worry about armor penetration. So it's really going to be just doing as much damage as you can with HE shells. But then again, I've sunk many a ship simply by burning them down or killing off the entire crew. You don't have to just flood out the enemy ship and sink it. If you can't penetrate them, load HE. It's a really effective way of taking ships out of the fight. So I think that's all I've got for this cruiser. Yeah. That's all I've got for this cruiser. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, go over to a new design. We'll go with a light cruiser. All right, the light cruisers, I like to make them a little bit more narrow. Now, what narrowing the beam does is, let me see here, 3,000. So what narrowing the beam does is twofold actually. Well, not twofold. The biggest thing is that if you make your hull more narrow, you actually improve your engine efficiency, right? So it's a good way of getting at least a small bump to the engine efficiency. All right, this guy on the other hand is going to make engine efficiency, and that's one of the reasons I like to take it down. I do like to take it down on this, is because this will be one of your early ships that gets really good engine efficiency. Main tower, with early cruisers, it's going to be nothing fancy whatsoever. Based on your budget, you know, you can go with the extra 2/10 of base accuracy and aiming speed and stuff like that, which I usually do on these because, well, you kind of have it to give early on. All right. Now, for those of you that are wondering how I'm fine-tuning the positioning on things, you hold the control on the keyboard. That'll allow you to do that. And also, early tech for your light cruisers, you're not going to be able to mount. Secondary guns. So it's going to be an all big gun ship. What I like to do, 4-inch barrels. They're tried, they're true. They work really well. Not to mention, you know, if you put 12 of these on one of these little ships, then you know you're getting an impressive volume of firepower. Okay. All right, and there's one other thing that you can do actually. Let me show you real quick. I'll put this here. R and T allow you to rotate turrets. So sometimes you'll find that you won't be able to get a turret to fit in a certain spot, but if you rotate it, you know, and it's not going to go here because just the hull is too narrow for this. But you can, see, there we go. See, it won't go in its hard point, but if you back it up to pretty much to the superstructure, you can get another set of 4-inch guns in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 2. There's that many on the other side, I hope. It is something else actually that you have to pay attention to, because sometimes when you rotate those, it won't put the turret on the other side. So you want to be aware of that as well. For these, can I bump them to 22 knots? No, 21 I think. 21 knots. You could leave it at 20 knots, which is faster than your battleships, but as fast as your heavy cruisers. The extra speed is kind of nice to have on a light cruiser. Don't neglect your torpedo tubes on the light cruisers. Light cruisers are going to be a little bit more nimble. They're able to get closer to larger ships. They're very useful to have torpedoes on. And actually, I lied. You do get secondary guns on this, so to speak. Your casement guns qualify as secondaries. Standard, actually, on cruisers, it's a little bit more important to have a little bit more crew on cruisers, or well, crew too. Well, no, I'm sorry, not crew, bulkheads, because they're lighter. They're going to take more damage, all right? And then crew quarters on these, I like to put standard. And there again, you know, it just depends on your particular preferences. And again, you can add, and I've done this both ways with my light cruisers. Sometimes I won't add the Citadel, but recently I've taken to adding that Citadel. It does add about 150, about 50,000 actually. It only adds 50,000 to the cruiser, so about that. So, yeah, you can do that. All right, now, early light cruisers. What I like to do is, let me see here, because let me see, double check my gun stats. 3.6. He's going to be a threat to pretty much any light cruiser and lower. with AP ammunition. But what I like to do with, particularly with my early light cruisers, is upgrade them to heavy shells, right? So what that's going to do is it's going to down his rate of fire, but I mean, you have 6 guns per broadside. Rate of fire is almost a non-issue. You go with enhanced reloading, standard ammo on the torpedo on this guy. You'll find that you'll get if you build these guys well, you'll find that you might use up all the torpedo ammunition on your light cruisers. Now for the armor, once again, we're going to go to our gun size. Main deck, yeah, the main deck almost is non-essential, but we do have a aft weight balancing issue. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to relocate those guns, put them there. There we go. Now we got a forward weight problem, which isn't the end of the world. Citadel on the inner deck, I'm going to put 0.1 just to give him a little something. Something to stop it from getting down into the vitals of the ship. Conning tower on these is not heavy at all. You're not going to be able to go with as heavy as you would with capital ships. Superstructure, go with a 1/2 inch. And again, what the superstructure is going to protect are your towers and particularly your funnels. Remember, if your funnels get destroyed, that's going to hamper the engine performance of your ships in combat. So superstructure armoring, you can leave that 0, but I like to put a little bit of protection on my superstructure if I can afford it. So we still have a forward weight offset. So the aft deck, I'm going to go ahead and put at +4. And here again with the casement guns, max those out. The 2-inch guns. And I'm a big fan of the 2-inch guns pretty much throughout the campaign because, again, it allows you to deal with those pesky light ships. They fire fast. Typically, they're more accurate than their larger counterparts, which, the general rule is the larger the bore, the more accurate the gun. And you can play around with those. But for me, most of my secondaries tend to be of the 2-inch variety. And there's a couple reasons for that, actually. They fire faster. They fire a lot faster, for one. But for two, it's the earliest gun you can actually increase the length on, which further increases their accuracy. As you can see, it doesn't do much with the range, but accuracy is going to be a big thing. So rate of fire plus accuracy. You might not be punching holes in what you're shooting at, but what you do get is a lot more chances to set fires, if nothing else. So leave your secondaries on max HE. For this guy, I think if I remember right, I went with increased HE. So that's going to give you, and I mean 3.9 inches of penetration. So you're, let's see here. And again, most of the AI builds are going to be iron plate from the get-go. So 4 inches of armor is going to be effective of 5.5. A little over 5.5. So yeah, increased HE actually might not be a good idea on this guy. We'll just leave him with max HE. Because the notion with this guy is going to be more, let me see here. Let me try something real quick. 3.9 divided by 1.38 is going to be, okay. So it's mathematics. If you want to figure out the pen on your gun, take the value that you're looking at and divide by the armor quality. If you're looking at your armor quality, you multiply by that quality. And remember, the percentages at 38%, it's 1.38. If it's 150%, it would be 2.5. Those are just some examples. In order to get to the actual value, I mean, you could always multiply by the percentage and then add it back into the original value, but that takes too long. Trying to save you some time, folks. Trying to save you some time. All right. So again, this is kind of an example of an early cruiser, light cruiser build that I typically do. And you'll notice I've got about 200 tons to spare. Spare tonnage actually isn't a bad thing early game because you're going to be getting refits. You're going to be getting some refits pretty early in the game. These battleships that I built have actually served my Navy for 12 years. So my original battleship design is getting up into the dreadnought era. They're becoming obsolete. I'm starting to have to phase them out in my campaign, but they do work for a good long time if you keep up with the refits. All right, and I'll get into that when I go through the research bit. So this is just my initial setup. All right. Last but not least, you want some torpedo boats. Torpedo boats are your friend. They're small, they're cheap, and let me see here. What was the max? 29. So early on, I'll just go with a 28 build. It's not close to max like I've been doing, but it does help. They're going to be fast. These guys are going to be fast. For these guys, if I remember right, I think I completely minimized everything. No, I didn't completely minimize the beam. I think I went with did I go with a neg-3 beam on that? 275 is the maximum torpedo boat size right now. Okay, yeah. That is looking a little bit more like what I typically do. All right, so for funnels, the dual funnel just takes up too much space and it doesn't do what you want it to do. So, do I do 3 or do I do 4 of those? I think my early torpedo boats, because your torpedo boats engine efficiency is going to be life on these things. It's not going to quite get there. How much space do those take up? Well, you have one of two options here. You can toy around with this and try to get your engine efficiency up into the 90s, if not 100%. Or another option is okay, it's a base level ship. What I'm trying to do with this is to just get the ship built. And you know what? I've got the room on this. That's right. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to put four small funnels on here. So you can nix that to save room for more armaments, but torpedo boats, again, the idea is to make them cheap. Very, very cheap. Very, very fast. Now, there's a couple of things you can do with this. You can do a standard centerline mount on the torpedo tube. That works. But what I've been doing, actually, and I find it works really well, is to mount 2 side tubes. Now, it's going to affect your roll, all right? But there again, these guys, you're not really looking at being a heavy combat ship with these guys. So we'll do that. I like to side mount something there, and then pay attention to your offset, because destroyers can be very, very tricky as far as balancing. Max bulkheads on destroyers are actually a really good idea because it helps with flooding control. It helps with, fire protection. So in destroyers, torpedo boats rather, these guys are torpedo boats. They're going to find themselves taking a lot of fire. Give them a spacious crew, because once again, more crew, more damage control is the biggest thing that you get with this. Enhanced reload. Now, on this guy, I've found that the light shells are most effective on the early ships, because mostly what you're shooting at are other torpedo boats or unarmored transports. So what this is going to do, if you go with standard shells, 6.2 seconds on the reload versus 10.33 or rounds per minute rather, so it's 5.8. So you're saving a good bit of time on reload. You don't need the extra damage, and light shells actually reduce all of the penalties that larger ammunition will give you, right? So okay, you're taking less shell damage, or you're doing less shell damage, but you have a reduction in or an increase in muzzle velocity, which is going to increase your accuracy overall. Well, obviously it increases accuracy, but it also pumps your muzzle velocity up pretty good, and it reduces the fire chance, explosion chance, and flash fire spreading. Leave these guys on max HE because you're okay at 1.4. Actually, I need to upgrade my my gun barrel length. There we go, 1.5. So at 1.5, I mean, okay, you might hurt a light cruiser with this, but torpedo boats, you'll notice, have no armor. So you don't need to armor these guys up. Well, you can't armor these guys up. So it's best to stick with max HE, light shells. And as you get upgrades, like I said, you'll go to the nose fuse, do more damage, and I don't think you'll have torpedo boats. Torpedo boats will pretty well be obsolete by the time you get to the high capacity HEs. All right. Now there are other things I've done, and right now you only have black powder, but one thing I do like to do on destroyers is put picric acid. It's a much higher increased chance of causing fires. It drastically increases the damage on your HE shells as well. So the picric acid is to me a decent choice for destroyers. Just be aware you have a higher chance of fires and explosions and stuff like that, your ships with them. So they can make your ships exploding. Just be aware of that. As you move into more modern destroyers, though, I get away from the light shell size and I start going up to more like heavy shells to, again, cause more damage. And again, also because when you start getting destroyers, you'll start to see enemy destroyers. Or when you start to see enemy destroyers, probably is a better way to rephrase this. You want to move up your destroyers to light shells. But this is just an early build. I go with all 2-inch guns. Higher rate of fire, better accuracy. And you don't have to worry about armor for the most part with because these guys, when you dance in to fight with heavier ships, you're not concerned with these doing damage. You're concerned with your torpedoes doing damage. All right, so I'm going to save those designs. I'm going to exit the ship designer. All right, so from the get-go, politics, they're not going to kick in until the next turn. But what you want to do is go to finances. All right. Actually, no. You want to go to ship design first. You want to build your fleet. So with Germany, there's there's really two main areas that you have to worry about with Germany. You have, your homeland, of course. You have Africa, which is this recent campaign I've been doing, I've mostly been ignoring Africa. I've just put token fleets to sort of add some protection to transports running through these areas. So you have Africa, but another big area that you really have to worry about is you have a nice base of operations in the Yellow Sea. So for ship design, what I'll start off with typically is 3 or 4 of my initial battleships. And this time I'm actually going to go with 4. And so to give you an idea, I'm going to put 2 of them over here because it just makes sense to have 2 battleships here. But then what I'll do is I'll create 2 fleets over here. I like to start one in Emden. I like to start one in Palau. All right, so we go with Emden, and that sort of covers all of your fronts. And it really depends ultimately on how you play your politics as the campaign progresses. But I like to put these guys. Actually, that's another area I forgot about. Let me go take a look at that real quick. Because you can also, like if you do an early war with Spain, a good tactic with early war with Spain is to take out the Caroline Islands. That way you pretty much dominate North Oceania. The only other one you'd have to worry about is the British down here. If you take all of this, though, you control the whole of North Oceania. And sea control really actually is important. If you can eliminate enemy ports on sea zones, it'll help immensely with protecting your transports and such. So let me see here. No, I'm going to go ahead and put him in Tsingtao. If I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, please let me know. All right. So for ship designs, I'm going to go ahead and build 4 of these heavy cruisers, and 1 in Emden, 1 in Palau, 1 in Tsingtao, and I also like to put one of these guys down in those in the Solomon Islands. I like to have a little fleet down there that I can work with. All right. For light cruisers, how many of these did I build? Was it 6 or was it 8? You see 2, 2. It's going to be 8 this time, actually. All right, so let me see here. We go with Emden, Pilau, Tsingtao, and Aniaria. Now I have 4 spares, and depending on what you want to do, and what I usually like to do is I like to beef that fleet up. Why? You're gonna want ships in the North Sea because you have 2 major rivals on that side. You have 2 major rivals over here. You have France and you have Britain. And if you go to your politics, France and Britain are on pretty good terms. And politics are actually another important thing of this. You don't want the whole world ganging up on you, especially if you're playing as Germany. They have sort of limited ship capacity from the start. All right. Sometimes, though, what I like to do also is, let me see here. I like to put light cruisers down in West Africa because what you have to do there is protect your shipping. All right, so put a light cruiser there. He can kind of cover maybe this area in here. Aniaria will send one of them to help the heavy cruiser that we put down there. And let me see here. Oh yeah, I'm going to send one to Southwest Africa. And what I'll do, or what you can do anyway, what can be done is move him from there up to here, and then he covers all of this. You get some fleet coverage in the West Indian Ocean. Light cruisers are really good to put out by themselves. They're fast. They typically have pretty good range, and they're not bad convoy defense ships. You can beef those up with heavy cruisers if you really want. Your battleships, though, you want focused in your main combat fleets. That takes care of the light cruisers, yes. All right, and then torpedo boats. These guys we're going to build a mess of. Check the finances real quick and see the naval funds are running down. So this is what I mean by taking care with your finances. You don't want to drain your money completely. I don't think that ends well. All right, and I'll come back to the finances here momentarily. So what I like to do is pair up my torpedo boats in most of my fleets. Sometimes I'll leave destroyers by themselves. It works really well, actually. So we go with 2 in Tsingtao, 2 in Palau, and then Aniaria, wherever that went. Do 2 down there, and I have a heavy cruiser-led fleet down there. All right, so we have 4 of these left. Lorengau is nice to have one of these guys in because Lorengau is right here. So he kind of can cover out a little bit into North Oceania, but don't expect much out of your early ships. They just they don't have the operational range, and operational range is actually important. So when you're designing your ships, take that into account. You do want, and I mean, it gets a lot better as your technology progresses. It's just torpedo boats; they don't go far. I'll put one of these in Dar es Salaam. And torpedo boats, you also want to keep those fairly minimal because they sort of get blown up pretty easy. So, so keep that in mind as your you want your let me see here, Lorengau. I already did one over there. We'll put him in Loam with that light cruiser, and we can shift things around as we need. And the last one I'm going to put in Helgoland. Because it's this little bitty island just off the German coast, and it actually does pretty good about getting out into the North Sea. So sometimes I like to stack torpedo boats and maybe even a light cruiser or 2 there in the event that I go to war with Britain. All right, so that takes care of your fleet. Finances. I'm going to do finances next. I always like to bump blast my tech budget all the way out. Transport capacity early on, I also like to max out because when you increase your transport capacity, you increase your GDP, which increases your overall funding. All right, so it is something to consider. So you take your GDP, you have your naval budget percentage, and that's what you get. So the higher you can get this, the more you're going to get here, and that does come into play with events that you have to make a decision on. You can increase your naval budget to the detriment of your GDP. Okay, that'll get you funds quickly, but and it's something I generally go for is up my GDP. Why? More GDP, stronger economy, more money ultimately. Another thing you're going to want to do early, very early, is ship capacity. Now, this says 80 million, and you'll notice I only have just shy of 70 million, but it's per month. So it's going to spend a percentage of this every month, right? And let's see what that does. That takes us down to positive 9.5 million, give or take. Now, this is going to do 2 things. It's going to increase your shipyard size, which allows you to build bigger boats, but it's also going to increase your shipbuilding capacity. At least that's how I've seen it. All right. Now, Germany can be really tough to play as early because, as you can see, they've got a small home area, which actually isn't bad. It makes them more defensible. Be careful about going to war with Russia and Britain and or France at the same time, because then you have to deal with the Russian fleet over here and the British or French fleet over here. That can be problematic. But the real problem with Germany is that they have a lot of colonies that are very, 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 very far flung. And that can create problems because look at your army logistics. That's going to hamper the fighting ability of your land forces. Now, the land forces, you don't decide where they go, when they go. Naval invasions, though, you do, and army logistics also play into the naval logistics. And I think that's why some of my naval battles and my naval invasions have failed before, is because the Army logistics is really bad. So that's another reason to get your transport capacity up early, is because it's going to add modifiers to your Army logistics. All right. Last but not least, research. Now, there's two ways you can do this, and having experimented with both of them, there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can focus several different techs at once, but what that does is it detracts from everything else. So what I've noticed, and again, I think thanks to Brother Monroe, he'll focus on one, and it's actually been working out really well for me. You don't have to focus on anything. You can just let them go. But it's a good idea to pick techs to focus on. So from the get-go, what do we have? Oh, we're going to get hull strengthening soon, which hull strengthening is really nice. It's going to add this, right? New structural steel. It's going to add those modifiers to your ships. Okay, better hull form means better performance, better resistance, obviously reduction in damage, and then it reduces the hull weight, which you reduce the hull weight, you can add bigger and better equipment to all of your ships. All right, so that might actually be a good one to focus on at first. Check your tech level on your guns and stuff though. Submarines early on, if you're starting in 1890, you don't really need to worry about this. Just let them do what they're going to do. So what do you want to push for first? If it's me, I'm actually looking at big guns. So I think I'll just go with the big guns. And then of course, because if you've done this, you've pumped your finances into technology. Crew training, not terribly important. First off, typically I'll hover between 25 and 50%, depending on what I want to do. Now keep in mind, crew training not only increases your crew pool, the number of recruits you get, but it also is going to increase their training level. And actually, I just figured this out. Look at that. Average training is cadets. And you'll find actually that as you go through the game, you can take ships, like if you have outdated ships, like, oh, I have 27 of these pre-dreadnought ships, and I need to start saving some money and stuff. Like, you can take these and mothball them. You can mothball them, and the mothballing thing is nice. So here's another tip: the add crew. During times of war, I'll leave that on for the most part. But if you take this off, because if you leave this on and you mothball a ship, the next turn it's going to recommission. It can get kind of annoying. So if you take this off, the add crew, and you mothball a ship, you actually develop the option to sell those mothballed ships to secondary countries. And I think it's limited to your minor nation allies, which at the start of the game you don't really have any. All right. So it's something to consider. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully you found this informative. As always, you can leave comments for me. Let me know if there's something I overlooked, or if you have a question about something, I'll answer it to the best of my ability. And yeah, all right. So thanks for stopping by.